Move that rusted thing before it scares away my investors, Victoria Hale said, and every polished face beneath the glass awning of the Meridian Ridge Resort turned toward the old Ford truck coughing at the curb like it had dragged half the mountain down with it. Rain fell in thin silver lines over the valet lane, tapping against black umbrellas, marble steps, chrome luggage carts, and the spotless row of luxury SUVs waiting outside the five-star entrance. Then there was Ethan Walker's 1979 Ford F-250, faded blue beneath patches of brown rust, one headlight slightly dimmer than the other, mud dried along the wheel wells, a dent in the passenger door shaped like an old memory no one had bothered to ask about. Behind the wheel sat Ethan, 39, quiet-eyed, broad-shouldered in a worn canvas jacket, his hands calloused from work, his face calm in that steady way people mistake for weakness when they have never had to survive anything real. Beside him, his 8-year-old daughter Lily hugged a small backpack to her chest and stared through the windshield at the crowd. She had just finished singing with her school choir at the resort's charity breakfast, and the ribbon in her blonde hair was already loosening from the damp air. She had been proud when her daddy pulled up. Proud until the laughter started. Grant Whitmore, Victoria's fiancé and the kind of man who smiled like cameras were always watching, stepped forward with his tailored coat buttoned tight and a coffee in one hand. "I'm sorry," he said loudly, turning so the investors could hear him. "Is that a truck, or did the scrap yard lose one of its pets?" A few people laughed. Not loudly at first. Rich people rarely laugh loudly when they are being cruel. They let the room do it for them. A woman near the revolving doors covered her mouth. A valet looked down at his shoes. Victoria did not laugh, but she did not stop it either. She stood at the center of it all in a cream-colored coat, her dark blonde hair pinned neatly beneath the soft glow of the entrance lights, her expression smooth and controlled. She had built Meridian Ridge into one of the most exclusive mountain resorts in Colorado, a place where guests paid more for one weekend of silence than Ethan made in a month repairing engines and pulling stranded tourists out of ditches. To Victoria, image was not decoration. It was survival. And Ethan's truck, sitting there dripping rainwater and mountain mud onto her perfect stone driveway, looked like a crack in the world she had polished for years. "Sir," she said, her voice cool enough to cut through the weather, "this entrance is reserved for hotel guests and event sponsors. You'll need to move your vehicle around back." Ethan looked at her through the open window. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend the truck. He did not tell her how many winter roads it had crossed or how many people had cried with relief at the sight of those dim headlights coming through a storm. He only nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Lily's fingers tightened around her backpack strap. "Daddy," she whispered, small enough that only he heard it. "They're making fun of Blue." That was what she called the truck. Blue. Like it was alive. Ethan turned toward her, and something gentle moved across his face. "Come on, sweetheart," he said softly. "Let's not teach them how to be kind by becoming unkind." Grant chuckled again, leaning closer to Victoria. "That thing has tetanus with tires. Honestly, Vic, if the board sees it in the welcome footage, they'll think we're running a hunting lodge from 1983. This time the laughter came easier. A few investors glanced at Ethan as if he were part of the service road, part of the weather, part of something unfortunate but temporary. Ethan opened his door and stepped into the rain. His boots hit the pavement with a quiet weight. He walked around to Lily's side and opened her door for her, holding one hand above her head to shield her from the rain, though his own hair and jacket were getting soaked. That small act should have shamed them. It did not. Not yet. Victoria watched the little girl climb down, watched Ethan tuck the ribbon behind her ear, watched him take her choir folder from the seat before the rain could spot the paper. For half a second, something in Victoria's eyes shifted, not sympathy exactly, but recognition of a tenderness she had not expected from a man driving something she had already judged. Then Grant's voice pulled her back. "Valet team," he said, snapping his fingers. "Let's clear this eyesore." Ethan looked at him then. Not angry, not wounded, just still. The kind of stillness that made the rain seem louder. "No need," Ethan said. "I can move it." He guided Lily toward the side entrance where the school children were gathering, then returned to the truck. The engine turned over with a rough growl that made one of the valets wince. Grant smirked. Victoria folded her arms. The investors turned away, already forgetting him. But above the valet lane, tucked beneath the black dome of a security camera, the lens caught something no one standing there noticed. On the lower corner of Ethan Walker's windshield, half hidden by rainwater and the sweep of an old wiper blade, was a faded rescue decal from the Rocky Mountain Volunteer Emergency Response Unit. The date on it was 12 years old. The name below it was nearly washed away, and beside it, hanging from the rearview mirror, was a tiny silver cross with the initials GW engraved on the back. The truck rolled away from the marble entrance, past the luxury SUVs, past the laughing mouths, past the woman who believed power always arrived polished. Its tires crunched over wet gravel as it disappeared toward the service road. No one applauded. No one apologized. No one understood that before sunrise, when the mountain went dark and every expensive machine on that property failed, the same rusty truck they mocked would be the only thing strong enough to bring Victoria Hale's family home. By the time Ethan Walker guided the old Ford around the side of Meridian Ridge Resort, the laughter from the valet line had already faded behind him, swallowed by rain, glass walls, and the low hum of money pretending it was peace. He parked near the service entrance where delivery trucks came and went, beside a row of dumpsters hidden behind cedar fencing so guests would never have to see the machinery that kept luxury alive. Lily sat quietly in the passenger seat, her choir folder resting on her knees, one corner damp from the weather. Ethan shut off the engine, and for a moment the truck ticked softly in the silence, cooling down like an old workhorse catching its breath. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked. Lily looked toward the bright front entrance far across the property, where guests moved under umbrellas and warm lights made the stone columns glow. "They do not know Blue," she said. Ethan smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed tired. "No, they do not. They do not know you either." That one landed deeper. Ethan reached over and gently squeezed her shoulder. Most people only see what they are ready to see. Lily looked at the dashboard, at the faded rescue decal, at the tiny silver cross swinging gently from the mirror. "Mom saw everything," she whispered. Ethan's hand paused near the keys. The rain tapped harder on the windshield. "Yes," he said quietly. "She did." Before the silence could grow too heavy, the service door opened and a maintenance supervisor named Carl Benson waved from under the metal awning. Carl was 62, thick around the middle, with a white mustache and the worried eyes of a man who had spent 30 years fixing problems no one thanked him for preventing. "Ethan," he called. "Glad you made it. Sorry about the front. I heard some of it." Ethan climbed out and pulled up his collar against the rain. "Do not worry about it." Carl gave the truck a long look, not with judgment, but with respect. "Still running. Better than most things with computers," Ethan said. Carl almost smiled. "Good, because that is why I called you. Backup generator under the west wing is throwing faults again. Corporate sent 2 technicians last week. They replaced the panel, charged us enough to buy a small house, and now the system still drops whenever load transfers." Ethan opened the back of the truck and lifted out his toolbox. It was old, red, scratched along the edges, and clean inside in the way only a careful man's tools are clean. "How soon is the storm supposed to hit?" Carl glanced toward the sky. "Weather Service says heavy rain after 10, maybe wind gusts over 50 miles per hour along the ridge." Ethan looked past the resort roofline toward the dark shape of the mountains. The clouds were stacked, low and mean, pressing down over the pines. "It will come earlier." Carl studied him. "You think?" Ethan did not answer right away. He listened to the trees. He watched the thin streams of water already running along the curb. "Ground is full," he said. "If Ridge Road takes another inch fast, the shoulder near mile marker 7 will slide." Carl swallowed. "The Hale family lodge is past that." "I know." Inside the resort, warmth hit Ethan's face like a different world. The service hallway smelled of lemon cleaner, wet coats, and electricity. Somewhere above them, a piano played softly in the lobby, a bright, expensive melody floating over marble floors while beneath it, the bones of the building groaned with hidden strain. Ethan followed Carl down 2 flights of concrete stairs into the mechanical level. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Water heaters hummed. The backup generator sat behind a yellow safety rail, large and quiet, its digital panel blinking warnings in red. Ethan set down his toolbox and crouched in front of the transfer switch. He did not rush. He never rushed around machines. Machines told the truth if a man had the patience to listen. He checked the wiring. He touched the conduit. He smelled the faint sharpness of overheated insulation before Carl said a word. Who installed this bypass? Ethan asked. Carl grimaced. Contractor from Denver. Said it was temporary. Ethan leaned closer. Temporary can still burn a building down if people pretend it is permanent. Upstairs, Victoria Hale stepped out of a private elevator with Grant beside her and 2 board members following close behind. She had changed out of her rain-damp coat into a charcoal blazer, her expression composed again. The earlier moment at the valet line filed away where inconvenient feelings went to disappear. She was walking toward the investor luncheon when Carl emerged from the stairwell and nearly collided with her. Miss Hale, he said, a little breathless. The outside technician is looking at the generator now. Victoria frowned. Outside technician? Ethan Walker. Local mechanic. I called him because he knows older power systems. Grant gave a soft laugh. Of course he does. His truck is old enough to vote twice. Victoria shot him a brief look, not quite approval, not quite correction. Carl, we have certified vendors for this. Yes, ma'am, Carl said, and they missed something. That made her pause. Down in the mechanical room, Ethan tightened one connection, removed another, then found the real problem hidden behind a neat panel cover. A misrouted emergency communication feed tied into a circuit that would fail during transfer. His face changed, not dramatically, but enough that Carl noticed. What is it? Ethan asked. Does the Hale Lodge on the ridge still run its storm radio relay through this building? Carl nodded slowly. As far as I know. Ethan looked toward the ceiling, toward the polished world above, toward the woman who had judged a truck without knowing why it carried a radio older than most of her staff. Then if this system drops tonight, he said, that lodge may go dark and silent at the same time. Carl's mouth tightened. Can you fix it? Ethan picked up a wrench. I can fix the wiring. He glanced toward the concrete wall as thunder rolled far off over the mountain. But I cannot fix people who refuse to leave a bad road before it breaks. Lily noticed the storm before most of the adults did, not because she was smarter than them, but because children who grow up beside hardship learn to listen when the world changes its breathing. She sat at a small round table near the staff hallway with her choir folder open, pretending to color in the blank spaces around a printed music note while her eyes kept drifting toward the tall lobby windows. Beyond the glass, the Colorado sky had gone from gray to bruised purple, and the pine trees along the ridge were bending in one direction as if the mountain itself had turned its face away. Guests moved through the lobby with warm drinks and soft sweaters, smiling at the weather like it was decoration. To them, rain at a resort was atmosphere. To Lily Walker, rain on a full mountain was a warning. She pulled her father's old phone from the side pocket of her backpack. The screen had a thin crack near the corner, and the battery never lasted long, but Ethan had loaded it with the same radar app he used on rescue calls years ago. Green and yellow bands moved across the map, then orange, then a red line pushing hard from the west. Lily zoomed in with 2 careful fingers and found Ridge Road twisting above Meridian Ridge like a thin gray thread. Her small mouth tightened. She had ridden that road with her father in winter, had watched him slow near mile marker 7 where the shoulder dipped and the guardrail leaned outward over a steep slope of wet pine and rock. She knew the place because Ethan always went quiet there. Not scared. Respectful. There was a difference. Across the lobby, Victoria Hale stood near the fireplace with Grant Whitmore and a cluster of board members, discussing dinner placements, investor confidence, and the evening reception as if schedules could command the sky. Victoria held a tablet in one hand and spoke with clean precision. Move the Mountain Lodge call to 7 o'clock. Mother dislikes late check-ins, and no one needs dinner before the roads get messy. One of her assistants nodded. Grant sipped sparkling water from a glass bottle and glanced toward the windows. It is just rain, Vic. We are in Colorado. If the resort panicked every time a cloud showed up, we would be bankrupt. Lily slipped down from her chair and walked across the lobby with the phone held against her chest. Her shoes made tiny squeaks on the polished stone. A few adults looked down as she passed, then looked away. Children are often invisible in rooms where grown-ups are busy proving importance to one another. She stopped a few feet from Victoria. Miss Hale. Victoria turned, surprised to see the same little girl from the valet lane. Her face softened by habit, the kind of public softness powerful people learn for charity breakfasts. Yes, sweetheart. Lily held up the phone. My daddy says Ridge Road gets bad when the red part comes over the west side. Grant lowered his drink and smiled like he had been handed entertainment. Your daddy predicts weather too? Lily looked at him with clear blue eyes. He listens to it. One of the board members chuckled. Grant tilted his head. And what does he drive? Again? Because from what I saw, your daddy does not chase storms. He brings one with him. The laughter was smaller this time, but it still found Lily. It touched her cheeks. It made her look down at her shoes. Victoria saw it. She saw the girl's fingers tighten around the phone. She saw the ribbon in her hair droop from the damp air. And still, Victoria said only, "Thank you for telling me. We have a professional operations team watching the conditions." It was not cruel. That was the trouble. Cruelty can be fought. Polite dismissal often walks away clean. Lily nodded, because her father had taught her manners even when other people forgot theirs. "Okay," she whispered. As she turned to leave, Grant called after her gently enough to sound harmless. "Tell your dad not to worry. We will send a shiny truck if we need one." The fireplace cracked softly behind them. Rain struck the windows harder now, not tapping but pressing, streaking the glass until the mountain view blurred. Lily returned to the staff hallway and found Ethan stepping out of the service stairwell with Carl Benson behind him. Ethan's sleeves were rolled up, his hands clean but still smelling faintly of copper wire and machine oil. The moment he saw Lily's face, his expression changed. "What happened?" he asked. She shook her head, trying to be brave. "I told them about the road." Ethan glanced toward the lobby. "And they have a professional operations team." Carl muttered something under his breath. Ethan took the phone from Lily, studied the radar for 3 seconds, then handed it back. "Go sit by the diner entrance where Mrs. Alvarez can see you. I need to speak with Miss Hale." He did not storm across the lobby. He did not carry anger like a weapon. He walked with purpose, past the flower arrangements, past the leather chairs, past the guests who could smell money but not danger. Victoria noticed him coming and straightened, as if preparing for an inconvenience. "Mr. Walker," she said, "if this is about earlier, now is not a good time. It is about Ridge Road." Grant sighed. "Here we go." Ethan kept his eyes on Victoria. "Your mother and nephew are still at the lodge?" The question landed, sharper than his tone. Victoria blinked. "Yes, they are leaving after dinner." "They need to leave now." Grant laughed once. "Absolutely not. We have security vehicles, satellite phones, and a weather contract that costs more than your truck." Ethan turned to him calmly. "Then use all 3 and get them down before dark." The room around them slowed. Victoria's jaw tightened. "You are a mechanic, Mr. Walker." "Today, yes. And you expect me to evacuate my family lodge because you looked at clouds and a children's weather app?" Ethan looked toward the windows, where the first low rumble of thunder rolled over the ridge like a warning spoken in a language older than pride. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "I expect you to do it because the mountain is already telling you what your money is not." For one brief second, the room had no answer. Even Grant did not speak. Then a server dropped a spoon near the coffee station, and the spell broke. Victoria exhaled, controlled and cold. "I appreciate your concern. Carl will handle the generator. My team will handle my family." Ethan nodded once, the way a man nods when he has done all he can without being allowed to do more. He turned back toward Lily. And behind him, through the rain-streaked glass, the lights along Ridge Road flickered once, then steadied, as if the mountain had blinked. By early evening, Meridian Ridge had dressed itself for money. The ballroom glowed with amber chandeliers, white tablecloths, polished silverware, and tall windows where the storm moved like a dark animal beyond the glass. Waiters carried trays of roasted salmon, warm rolls, and sparkling cider between clusters of investors who spoke in calm voices about expansion, reputation, and market confidence. A string quartet played near the fireplace, though every now and then the wind pressed against the windows hard enough to make the violins sound smaller. Victoria Hale stood near the front of the room beneath a screen showing renderings of the resort's new mountain villas. Her smile was steady. Her posture was perfect. Everything about her said control, but her eyes kept drifting toward the windows. Ridge Road was still open, according to her operations team. Her mother had texted a heart emoji after dinner. Noah had sent a blurry picture of a board game. The lodge had power. The road cameras still showed visibility. Everything was fine, because everything had to be fine. Grant Whitmore stepped to the microphone before Victoria could begin her investor remarks. He loved microphones. They made his confidence look useful. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, lifting his glass, "before Victoria shares the future of Meridian Ridge, I think we should honor what makes this brand special." A few people smiled. Victoria turned slightly, unsure where he was going. Grant clicked a small remote. The screen changed. Instead of the new villas, it showed a security image from the valet lane earlier that afternoon. Ethan Walker's old Ford sitting wet and crooked beneath the luxury awning. A ripple of laughter moved through the ballroom. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. Grant grinned. "This, my friends, is what we are not building." The laughter grew warmer, easier, more comfortable because it came from above. "Our guests do not come here for junkyard energy. They come for excellence. They come for elegance. They come because Meridian Ridge understands that presentation is not vanity. It is trust." Victoria's smile did not move, but something tightened behind it. Near the service doors, Ethan stood with Carl Benson, a paper cup of coffee untouched in his hand. He had finished rewiring the generator bypass less than 20 minutes earlier. The West Wing emergency systems were stable now, at least as stable as they could be with the storm walking toward them. He had planned to collect Lily from Mrs. Alvarez near the diner entrance and go home before the worst of the weather closed the lower road. But Carl had asked him to stay long enough to confirm the load transfer during the evening test. So Ethan stayed. Quietly. Usefully. Invisible until someone needed a punchline. Lily stood beside him now, half hidden behind his jacket, watching the screen with her small face gone still. On that screen, the old Ford looked worse than it did in real life. Security cameras have a way of stripping dignity from poor things. Flattening color, exaggerating rust, turning survival into evidence against itself. Grant continued, his voice smooth as cream. "We will not let carelessness park at our front door. We will not let tired equipment define a luxury experience. And we will certainly not let anyone tell us that old habits and old machines can protect a modern brand." Carl's jaw worked slowly. "That is enough," he muttered. Ethan did not move. Victoria looked across the room and saw him. For the first time that evening, the presentation vanished from her mind. She saw Lily first, then Ethan's hand resting gently on her shoulder, not gripping, not pulling her away, simply reminding her she was not alone. That should have been enough for Victoria to stop Grant. It was not. Pride is often quietest at the moment it should speak. Grant turned toward Ethan with false surprise, as if he had just noticed him. "Mr. Walker, no offense. I am sure that truck has sentimental value." A few guests chuckled again. Ethan lifted his eyes. "It does." 2 words. No performance. No apology. Grant smiled wider. "Well, sentiment is lovely. But Meridian Ridge is not a roadside garage. We have an image to maintain." Ethan set the coffee cup down on a side table. The paper made a soft, hollow sound against the wood. "Then maintain it." The room quieted at the calmness of his voice. Grant blinked. "Excuse me." Ethan stepped forward just enough for the light to touch the rain still drying on his jacket. "You want me gone from the front entrance?" "I moved." "You want the generator fixed?" "I fixed it." "You want me to pretend that road is safe because it helps the evening feel expensive?" "I cannot do that." Grant's expression sharpened. "Careful." Ethan did not look at him. He looked at Victoria. "Your mother and nephew should not be up there tonight." Victoria's face cooled, but her eyes betrayed the smallest flicker of fear. "Mr. Walker, this is not the place." "No, ma'am," Ethan said softly. "A washed-out road is not the place. A dark lodge with no clear way down is not the place. This is still the place where someone can choose better before choosing gets taken away." The ballroom held its breath. Outside, thunder rolled over the ridge, closer this time. The chandeliers trembled so faintly that only those watching carefully saw it. Grant laughed, but it came out thin. "You hear that? A mechanic with a weather sermon." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his keys. They were worn smooth, hanging from a small metal tag stamped with the name Grace. Lily saw it and swallowed. Ethan closed his fist around them. "I will leave," he said. "But when the ridge road floods, do not send anything pretty. Send something that can bleed and keep moving." No one laughed then, not even Grant. For 3 seconds, the room remembered that dignity does not always arrive in a suit. Sometimes it stands near the service door with rain on its shoulders and says the truth without raising its voice. Then Victoria, trapped between public pride and private worry, chose the wrong one. "Thank you for your work, Mr. Walker, she said. Carl will process your invoice. Please drive safely. Ethan nodded once. Yes, ma'am. He turned, placed a steady hand behind Lily's back, and walked out through the service doors. The ballroom slowly filled with sound again, but not the same sound as before. The laughter did not return easily. The quartet resumed playing. Grant lifted his glass. Victoria faced the investors and began her speech. And outside, as Ethan's old Ford started in the rain behind the resort, the first warning light on the Ridge Road control panel blinked yellow. At 11:43 that night, the mountain stopped pretending. The storm came down with the full weight of everything Ethan Walker had warned them about, not as gentle rain for postcard windows, but as a hard, driving wall of water that blurred the resort lights and turned the pine-covered slopes into black shapes trembling in the wind. Meridian Ridge lost its view first. Then it lost its calm. The guests in the ballroom tried to keep smiling when thunder shook the tall windows. The quartet had packed away their instruments. The investors spoke more quietly now, checking phones that flickered between one bar and no service at all. Victoria Hale stood near the operations desk behind the lobby, watching a row of monitors. With her arms folded so tightly across her chest that her knuckles had gone pale. Ridge Road Camera 1 was still working. Camera 2 was frozen on a smeared image of rain. Camera 3 had gone black. Refresh it, she said. The young operations manager clicked twice. I did, Miss Hale. Then reset the feed. I already tried. Grant Whitmore stood behind her, still wearing his confident dinner jacket, though his confidence had begun to lose its shape. Power interruptions happen in storms, he said. This is exactly why we have systems. Carl Benson stepped into the room from the west corridor, rainwater dripping from his coat. The West Wing generator is holding because Walker fixed the bypass. But the Ridge relay is unstable. I am getting partial signal, then nothing. Victoria turned sharply. Call the lodge directly. We have been trying. Use satellite. The dish is iced with wind-driven rain, and the backup line is dropping. For the first time all evening, Victoria did not have a sentence ready. She looked down at her phone. The last message from her mother was from 8:17. Noah beat me at checkers. We will come down after dessert. A little heart sat at the end of it, innocent and unbearable. Victoria pressed call again. It rang once, clicked, then dissolved into static. Up at the Hale family lodge, 5 miles beyond the resort and almost 2,000 feet higher on the ridge, Margaret Hale sat in a wingback chair wrapped in a knitted blanket, trying not to frighten her grandson. The lodge was old but beautiful, built from stone and timber, with wide windows facing a valley that could no longer be seen through the storm. A fire glowed low in the hearth. Emergency lights cast the hallway in a dim amber wash. 10-year-old Noah knelt near the coffee table, gathering board game pieces into a box with hands that were trying to be steady. Aunt Victoria is sending someone, right? He asked. Margaret smiled with the gentle courage of a grandmother who knew children could hear fear even when adults covered it. Your aunt always sends someone. The lights flickered again. Somewhere outside, wind pushed a branch against the siding with a long scraping sound. Noah looked toward the rear sunroom, where rain struck the glass roof so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel. Grandma, he said, what if the road is gone? Margaret reached for her phone, but the screen showed no service. Her chest felt tight, not from panic alone, but from the condition her doctor had warned her not to ignore. She took a careful breath. Then we wait somewhere warm, and we do not borrow trouble before it arrives. But trouble was already moving down the mountain. At mile marker 7, the saturated shoulder of Ridge Road began to slump beneath the runoff. Mud spilled across the asphalt in slow, heavy sheets. A service guardrail leaned outward. Water filled the ditch, climbed over it, and started moving across the road like a shallow brown river. The resort's first security SUV reached the lower bend at 11:58. Its headlights swept across the washout, then stopped. The driver radioed back, voice tight but professional. Dispatch, this is Unit 2. Ridge Road is blocked. Repeat, blocked. We have mud across both lanes and debris coming down. I do not recommend crossing. Victoria heard the words over the operations speaker and closed her eyes for 1 second. 1 second was all she allowed herself. Send the second vehicle from the East Access Road. Carl shook his head. East Access is narrower and higher. If the main road is moving, that one is worse. Grant pulled out his phone. I will call private air rescue. In this wind? Carl asked. Grant ignored him. People fly in storms all the time. Carl looked at Victoria, not Grant. No helicopter is landing at that lodge in gusts over 50 miles per hour. Not safely. The private service confirmed it 3 minutes later. No aircraft until the wind dropped. County Rescue was already responding to 3 other calls and could not reach the lodge before morning unless the road cleared. Morning. The word entered the lobby like a cold draft. Victoria gripped the edge of the desk. My mother does not have until morning if her heart medication is interrupted. No one answered. Not the operations manager. Not Grant. Not the security team. Money could reserve suites, silence critics, by mountain views, and polish stone until it reflected candlelight. But money could not dry a washed-out road. It could not calm wind. It could not make a luxury SUV lighter than mud. Grant finally lowered his phone, his face pale beneath the lobby lights. We should issue a controlled statement, he said. Victoria slowly turned toward him. A statement. Before guests start posting. We need to manage perception. The room went still. Even the storm seemed to pause against the glass. Victoria stared at the man she had trusted to stand beside her, and for the first time saw how small a person could look inside an expensive suit. Then the emergency radio on Carl's belt crackled. Static. A broken voice. A child's voice, thin and frightened, pushing through the storm. This is Noah Hale at the Ridge Lodge. Grandma needs help. The backroom door is stuck. The lights are going out. Victoria's face drained. Noah, she whispered. Carl grabbed the radio. Noah, this is Meridian Base. Stay on the line. Where is your grandmother? Static swallowed half the answer. By the fireplace. She is breathing funny. I cannot get the door open. Victoria reached for the radio, but Carl held it steady. Noah, listen to me. Stay away from windows. Keep your grandmother warm. Help is coming. The boy's voice trembled. Who? No one in the operations room spoke. Outside, beyond the glass and the flooded drives, far behind the resort near the service road, an old radio inside a rusted blue Ford came alive with the same broken call. Ethan Walker, parked beneath the diner awning with Lily asleep under a blanket beside Mrs. Alvarez inside, lifted his head. The silver cross on his mirror swayed as thunder rolled over the ridge. He listened once. Then he reached for the keys. Ethan did not move fast at first. Men who understand danger rarely run toward it with noise. They prepare. He turned the key halfway, letting the old Ford's instruments wake in a dim green glow, then reached beneath the dashboard and switched on the auxiliary radio. Static filled the cab, broken by Noah Hale's frightened voice, then Carl Benson's steady instructions from the resort. Rain hammered the roof so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel. Inside the diner behind him, warm yellow lights spilled across the wet pavement, and Lily slept curled in a booth under Mrs. Alvarez's quilt, her choir ribbon on the table beside a half-empty cup of cocoa. Ethan looked at her through the window. For one breath, he was only a father. Not a mechanic. Not a rescuer. Not the man everyone had laughed at. Just a father measuring the weight of leaving his child safe so another child would not be left alone. Mrs. Alvarez, a round-faced woman with silver hair and the kind of eyes that had seen every kind of weather, stepped outside under the awning. I heard the radio, she said. Ethan opened the truck door and stepped into the rain. I need you to keep Lily here. Of course. If she wakes up, tell her I took Blue up the ridge. Mrs. Alvarez nodded, then looked toward the mountain road hidden beyond the dark. Ethan, that road is bad. He reached behind the seat and pulled out a folded yellow rain jacket, a rescue strap, and a flashlight with tape around the handle. I know. The diner door opened again. Lily stood there barefoot in her socks, the quilt wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes heavy with sleep, but suddenly alert. Daddy. Ethan's face softened. Hey, sweetheart. Go back inside. She looked at the truck, then at the radio crackling in the cab. Children raised around truth do not need long explanations. Someone needs help. Ethan crouched beneath the awning so he was level with her. Rain dripped from his hair. Yes. Lily reached into the pocket of her backpack and pulled out a small metal flashlight, scratched along one side, with a strip of faded white tape around it. It had belonged to Grace Walker. Ethan's wife had carried it on night calls years before, back when the truck had been more blue than rust, and hope had felt easier to keep. Lily pressed it into his hand. Take Mom's light. Ethan closed his fingers around it slowly. The tiny silver cross inside the cab swung in the wind from the open door. "I will bring it back," he said. Lily swallowed hard. Brave in the way children should not have to be, but sometimes are. "Bring them back too." Ethan kissed the top of her head, then stood. "I will do everything I can." He climbed into the Ford. The engine turned once, twice, then caught with a rough growl that rolled beneath the awning and into the rain. Across the resort property, Victoria Hale came through the service entrance at a near run, her cream blouse damp at the sleeves, her perfect composure finally cracked by fear. Carl followed behind her with a radio in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Grant was farther back, shouting into his phone about liability and county access, but his voice was already becoming part of the storm's useless noise. Victoria reached the truck just as Ethan shifted into gear. "Mr. Walker." He looked out the open window. Rain streaked down his face. "Your people have no on the radio. Keep him talking. Keep him away from glass and outside doors. I am going with you." Ethan stared at her. Not coldly. Carefully. "No, ma'am. That is my mother. That is my nephew. And that is a bad road. I do not care. You will if you panic on it." The words were not harsh, but they were firm enough to stop her. Victoria gripped the edge of the window frame, water running from her hairline to her jaw. "Please." That one word changed the air between them. Not because it erased what she had done, not because pride can be washed clean by one moment of fear, but because it was the first honest word she had spoken to him all day. Ethan looked past her to Carl. "You have a handheld radio that can reach the lodge?" Carl lifted it. "Barely, but yes." Ethan nodded toward Victoria. "Give it to her. If she comes, she listens. No arguing. No second-guessing. No boardroom voice." Victoria nodded quickly. "Fine." Ethan held her gaze. "Out there, pretty does not matter. Expensive does not matter. Pride gets people hurt. The road only respects weight, traction, and patience." Grant arrived under the awning, breathless and pale. "Victoria, you are not getting into that thing." Victoria turned on him with eyes he did not recognize. "My family is in trouble." "Then let professionals handle it." Carl looked at Ethan's truck, at the mud tires, the lifted suspension, the front winch, the old rescue lights mounted low behind the grill, and said quietly, "Right now, he is the professional who can move." Grant had no answer for that. Victoria climbed into the passenger seat, and for the first time she saw the inside of the truck clearly. It smelled of old leather, machine oil, rain, and cedar shavings. There were no luxuries, but nothing was careless. A folded wool blanket sat behind the seat. A first aid kit was strapped beneath it. A laminated topographic map rested in the door pocket, marked by hand. The dashboard was scarred but organized, every switch labeled in Ethan's clean block lettering. The truck was not neglected. It was prepared. Ethan eased the Ford out from under the awning and into the storm. Water sprayed from the tires. The headlights cut through sheets of rain, not bright and pretty like the resort vehicles, but low and steady, the kind of light that did not ask to be admired, only followed. At the first bend, the pavement gave way to runoff. Victoria braced one hand against the dashboard. Ethan did not speed up. He did not show off. He guided the truck with small corrections, letting the tires find grip where the water tried to pull them sideways. The radio crackled. Noah's voice came through again, thinner now. "Aunt Victoria?" Victoria snatched up the handset. "Noah, I am here." Static. Then, "Grandma is cold." Victoria's face changed. Ethan reached behind him without looking and handed her a thermal blanket. "Tell him to put this kind of blanket around her if they have one. Fireplace side, away from windows. Shoes on. Coats on. Stay low if the wind breaks anything." Victoria repeated every word, her voice shaking but clear. The Ford climbed higher. The resort lights disappeared behind them, swallowed by rain and distance. Ahead, Ridge Road curved into darkness. Ethan switched on the auxiliary beams. The old rescue decal on the windshield glowed for a second in the dashboard light, and Victoria saw it fully now. Rocky Mountain Volunteer Emergency Response Unit. Her mouth opened slightly, but no question came out. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel. "You mocked the truck," he said, not accusing, only naming the truth. Victoria looked down. "I did. Fine." The Ford rolled over a shallow wash of mud, steady as a heartbeat. But do not mock the road. The higher they climbed, the less the world sounded like a resort and the more it sounded like a living mountain under strain. Rain struck the hood in silver bursts. Water rushed along both sides of Ridge Road, filling the ditches, crossing the pavement in shallow streams, then vanishing over the edge into darkness. The Ford moved slowly, never more than 15 miles per hour, its engine low and steady, its tires gripping, releasing, gripping again. Victoria Hale sat rigid in the passenger seat with Carl's radio pressed between both hands, her eyes moving from the windshield to the dashboard to Ethan Walker's face. He did not look heroic in the way movies taught people to expect. He did not grin into danger. He did not speak in dramatic promises. He watched the road with a stillness that made the storm feel louder. Every few hundred feet, he adjusted the wheel by inches, listened to the engine, eased off the gas, then let the truck crawl forward as if he and the machine were remembering the same language. Victoria's breath caught when the headlights revealed a long ribbon of mud across the asphalt. Ethan stopped before it, not in it. He shifted into four-wheel drive low, reached to a small row of labeled switches under the dash, and turned on two amber lights mounted beneath the grille. Their glow cut low through the rain, showing the road surface instead of the storm. "Why are the lights so low?" Victoria asked before she could stop herself. "Fog and hard rain bounce high beams back at you," Ethan said. "Low light shows you what the tires need to know." He eased forward. The Ford rolled into the mud, shuddered once, then kept moving. Victoria looked down at the center console. There were handwritten labels beside each switch: auxiliary beams, rear flood, winch power, compressor, radio relay. Beneath her feet was a rubber floor mat worn smooth but clean. Behind the seat, straps held a first aid kit, a compact oxygen cylinder, two wool blankets, a coil of bright rescue rope, reflective triangles, a folding shovel, and a plastic box marked emergency road flares. Nothing was fancy. Everything had a purpose. "This is not just an old truck," she said quietly. Ethan did not look away from the road. "No, you built it for this." "My wife and I did." The answer changed the air inside the cab. The wipers moved back and forth. The silver cross hanging from the mirror trembled with every rut. Victoria glanced at the initials engraved on the back. "G.W. Grace?" she asked softly. Ethan's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with memory. Grace Walker. She was a nurse. Volunteer rescue. Best person I ever knew. The truck climbed past a stand of pines where wind shook water loose from the branches in heavy sheets. For several seconds, only the engine and rain spoke. Then Victoria, who had spent years filling silence with authority, let the silence teach her. Ethan continued, his voice low, almost as if he were talking to the road more than to her. "We bought this truck when Lily was still a baby. It was already old. Most people saw rust and miles. Grace saw a frame that could be trusted. I saw an engine I could keep alive. You used it for rescue calls? Floods, snowstorms, stranded hikers, families who thought all-wheel drive meant all roads." A faint sadness crossed his face. "Grace used to sit where you were sitting. She kept blankets under her feet and granola bars in the glove box because she said fear made people hungry after it passed." Victoria slowly opened the glove box. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag, were two emergency snacks, a small bottle of water, and a folded photograph. She did not touch the photograph, but the dashboard light showed enough. Ethan, younger, smiling in front of the same truck when it still wore brighter blue paint. A woman beside him with kind eyes and wind-blown blonde hair. A baby in her arms. On the truck door, painted in white letters, were the words Rocky Mountain Volunteer Emergency Response. Victoria closed the glove box with care. "What happened to her?" she asked, then immediately wished she had not. Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. "A rescue call. Spring floods 6 years ago. She got a mother and 2 kids warm before the ambulance arrived. Her heart had a condition we did not know about. By the time anyone understood she was the one who needed help, she had already given everything she had." There was no graphic detail in his voice. No bitterness. That made it harder to hear. It was grief worn smooth by years of carrying it with dignity. Victoria lowered her eyes. She thought of the ballroom screen. The laughter. Her silence. "I am sorry," she whispered. Ethan nodded once. "Me too." The radio crackled. Noah's voice came through, broken by static. "Aunt Victoria, the back hallway has water coming under the door." Victoria lifted the handset quickly. "Noah, listen to me. Stay with your grandmother near the fireplace. Put your shoes and coat on. Do not go near the glass room. Static swallowed his answer. Ethan reached across and gently adjusted the radio dial a fraction. The signal cleared. Noah, Ethan said, taking the handset without raising his voice. This is Ethan. Can you hear me? Yes, sir. Good. You are doing well. Is there a blanket near your grandmother? Yes. Wrap it around her shoulders. Not too tight. Keep her sitting up. If she has medicine, place it beside her where she can reach it. Okay. And Noah? Yes. You are not alone. We are coming. Victoria turned toward him then, and whatever remained of her old judgment began to collapse quietly inside her. Not because Ethan had told her who he was, because he had shown it in the way he spoke to a frightened child, as if calm itself could be handed through a radio. Ahead, the road dipped toward mile marker 7. Ethan slowed before the headlights found the problem. Mud covered the pavement from shoulder to shoulder. A fallen pine blocked half the lane. Beyond it, water rushed across the road in a brown sheet, not deep enough to look impossible, but strong enough to punish arrogance. Victoria swallowed. Can we cross? Ethan studied the flow, the angle, the debris, the movement of the mud near the far edge. Then he shifted the truck into park and reached for his rain jacket. Not yet. What are you doing? Listening closer. He stepped out into the storm, and the wind shoved rain sideways across the open door. Victoria watched him walk to the edge of the washout with Grace's flashlight. In his hand, the small beam moved over the road, patient and careful. In the cab, the radio hissed softly. The silver cross swayed. For the first time that day, Victoria Hale looked at the rusty dashboard, the old switches, the worn seat, and the memory of a woman's name hanging beneath the mirror, and understood that she had mistaken sacred things for broken ones. Ethan stood in the rain at mile marker 7 with Grace's flashlight cutting a small white path across the mud, and for nearly a full minute, he said nothing. The storm wanted speed. Fear wanted speed. Pride always wanted speed. But Ethan Walker had learned long ago that the mountain did not reward hurry. He crouched near the edge of the washout, pressed one gloved hand into the mud, then looked at how the water moved around a half-buried rock near the far shoulder. Behind him, Victoria sat in the cab with the radio clenched in her hands, watching the beam of the flashlight move slowly from the fallen pine to the shallow brown current crossing the road. Every second felt stolen from her mother's breathing and Noah's courage, but she forced herself not to shout. For once, she listened. Ethan returned to the truck, rain streaming off the brim of his cap. We cross at an angle, he said, opening the door. Not straight. I am going to let the front tires climb the high side, then ease the rear through the low wash. If I tell you to lean toward me, lean. If I tell you to be quiet, be quiet. If the radio cuts, do not shake it. Just hold it high. Victoria nodded. Understood. The word came out different now. Not corporate. Human. Ethan shifted into gear, locked the hubs, and touched the accelerator with the care of a man setting down something fragile. The Ford rolled forward. Mud rose around the tires. Water pushed against the doors. The truck tilted slightly, and Victoria's breath caught, but Ethan's hand stayed calm on the wheel. Lean, he said. She leaned toward him, one hand gripping the seat, the other lifting the radio higher. The old engine grumbled, not loud, not proud, just steady. The tires slipped once. Ethan eased off instead of fighting. The truck settled, found grip, and climbed. On the far side, the right rear tire bumped over the buried rock, the frame groaned, and then the Ford pulled free onto broken pavement. Victoria let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Ethan did not celebrate. He only switched on the rear light and checked the mirror. Road gets narrower now. At the lodge, the front porch lights flickered weakly through the rain. The house looked less like a mountain retreat now and more like a lonely ship in black water. Ethan parked above the driveway, away from the runoff, and handed Victoria a flashlight. Stay behind me. Step where I step. Noah, Victoria said into the radio, we are outside. Static cracked, then the boy answered. Aunt Victoria, Grandma is still by the fireplace. The back room door will not open. Ethan moved first, carrying the medical kit and the coil of rope. Victoria followed, slipping once on wet gravel before Ethan caught her elbow without comment. That quiet kindness hurt more than any rebuke. The front door opened after Victoria punched in the security code. Inside, the lodge smelled of wet wood, smoke, and fading heat. Margaret Hale sat near the fireplace with a blanket around her shoulders, pale but awake, her hand resting over her chest. Noah knelt beside her with a flashlight in his lap and tears drying on his cheeks. "Aunt Victoria," he said, and ran to her. Victoria dropped to her knees and held him tightly for one breath, then another, then released him because Ethan was already beside Margaret, speaking with calm respect. "Mrs. Hale, my name is Ethan. I am going to help you stay warm and steady until we get you down the mountain. Can you tell me if you have your medication nearby?" Margaret nodded toward the side table. Her voice was thin but clear. "You are the man with the old truck." Ethan gave a faint smile as he opened the medical kit. "Yes, ma'am. Victoria said nothing about you being an angel." Ethan shook his head gently. "No angels here. Just tires that still hold." Margaret managed the smallest smile, and Victoria lowered her eyes. Then a noise came from the rear of the lodge, not violent, but heavy, the sound of shifting wood and water pressing where it did not belong. Noah turned quickly. "The sunroom door is stuck. My backpack is in there, and the inside door will not move." Ethan stood and crossed the hallway, shining Grace's flashlight along the floor. Water had seeped beneath the rear threshold and swollen the lower frame. A fallen branch outside had pressed against the sunroom entrance, pinning the door just enough to trap anything behind it and threaten the glass if the pressure worsened. Ethan studied it, then looked at Victoria. "We do not force it from inside. We pull the branch from outside and take pressure off the frame." "Can the truck do that?" she asked. Ethan was already moving. That is why it came. He ran the winch line from the Ford to the fallen branch, working in rain so thick Victoria could barely see him from the porch. She held the flashlight while Noah stood beside Margaret with the blanket tucked around her shoulders. Ethan clipped the hook, checked the angle, then returned to the cab. "Everyone stay inside and away from the rear windows," he called. The winch motor began to hum, low and patient. The cable tightened. The branch shifted inch by inch, water pouring off its needles. The old Ford held firm, tires planted in mud, engine idling like a heartbeat under strain. At last, the branch rolled clear of the sunroom door and settled harmlessly beside the drive. Ethan released the line, returned to the lodge, and opened the swollen door with one steady pull. Noah's backpack sat on a chair inside, dry and waiting. Noah grabbed it and whispered, "Thank you, sir." Ethan placed a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. "You did good tonight." Getting Margaret to the truck took time. Ethan wrapped her in a thermal blanket, supported her carefully with Victoria on the other side, and guided each step as if the whole night had narrowed down to one sacred duty: bring people home. At the driveway, headlights suddenly appeared below them. Grant's Range Rover had made it partway up the lower access road, gleaming black and useless where the mud had taken hold of its tires. Grant stood beside it in the rain, phone raised, face full of panic he tried to hide. "Victoria," he called, "my vehicle is stuck." Victoria stared at him, then at her mother, then at Ethan. Ethan did not sigh. He did not smile. He did not punish the man with his silence. He settled Margaret into the back seat, helped Noah climb in beside her, then reached for the tow strap. Victoria touched his sleeve. After everything he said, Ethan looked toward Grant's stranded headlights, then back at her. "A person does not have to deserve help before we give it." The words landed in her chest like judgment and mercy together. Ethan hooked the strap to the Range Rover, eased the Ford forward, and pulled Grant free with no speech, no display, no revenge. Then he turned the old truck downhill, carrying Margaret, Noah, Victoria, and the man who had mocked him, all inside the circle of its dim, faithful light. When the Ford finally rolled back into Meridian Ridge near dawn, covered in mud from bumper to tailgate, the resort had gathered at the entrance: staff, guests, investors, security, Carl, Mrs. Alvarez, and Lily wrapped in her quilt. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one looked at the rust first. They looked at Margaret stepping safely from the back seat. They looked at Noah, holding his aunt's hand. They looked at Grant silent and soaked beside the door. Then they looked at Ethan Walker, who climbed out last, closed the truck door gently, and handed Grace's flashlight back to Lily. The mountain had spoken. The truck had answered. And the whole resort stood in the kind of silence that sounds almost like respect. By sunrise, the storm had moved east, leaving Meridian Ridge washed clean and strangely quiet, as if the mountain itself had grown tired of shouting. Pale gold light touched the wet roof lines, the glass entrance, the puddles along the valet lane, and the old Ford sitting beneath the same awning where laughter had found it the day before. Mud covered its tires. Pine needles clung to the grill. A long streak of brown water ran down the driver's door and crossed the faded blue paint like a scar. But no one saw an eyesore now. Staff members stood in small clusters near the lobby doors, wrapped in coats, coffee cups untouched in their hands. Investors who had come to discuss luxury villas stood without speaking. The valet who had looked at his shoes during Grant's jokes now stared at the truck as if it had become part of the mountain's own history. Carl Benson stood beside Mrs. Alvarez, his radio finally silent on his belt. Lily remained close to Ethan, still wrapped in the quilt from the diner booth, holding Grace's flashlight against her chest with both hands. Ethan did not stand in the center. He never had. He stood beside the truck, one hand resting lightly on the wet hood, as if thanking an old friend for making it one more mile. Margaret Hale had already been helped inside by resort staff and was being checked by medical responders who had finally reached the property after dawn. Noah refused to leave the lobby windows until he could see Ethan. When their eyes met through the glass, the boy lifted one small hand. Ethan lifted his in return. No speech, no spotlight, just a promise completed. Grant Whitmore stood near the revolving doors in a damp suit, his expensive shoes stained with mountain mud. He tried once to speak to Victoria, tried to explain the Range Rover, the failed calls, the pressure, the storm, the impossibility of it all. But excuses sound different after someone else has carried the burden. They no longer sound like reasons. They sound like decorations on fear. Victoria did not answer him. She walked past him slowly, out through the front entrance, into the cold morning air. Her hair was loose now, her makeup softened by rain and worry, her cream blouse wrinkled beneath a borrowed coat. She looked less like a woman presenting a brand and more like a daughter who had almost lost her mother, an aunt who had heard a child's fear through static, and a leader finally meeting the cost of her own pride. The crowd parted without being asked. Ethan turned as she approached. He did not straighten like an employee waiting for judgment. He did not look away like a man expecting another insult. He simply stood there, quiet and steady, while the mountain dripped from the eaves behind him. Victoria stopped a few feet away. For a moment, she looked at the Ford. Really looked. The rust around the wheel wells. The rescue lights tucked behind. The grill. The old decal on the windshield. The cross hanging from the mirror. The name Grace stamped on Ethan's key tag. Then she looked at Lily, whose small face held both caution and hope. Finally, Victoria looked at Ethan. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, but the entire entrance heard it. Yesterday, I was ashamed of that truck in front of my hotel. The words settled across the wet stone. Grant looked down. One investor slowly removed his hands from his pockets. Victoria swallowed, but she did not stop. This morning, I am ashamed of myself in front of it. No one moved. Even the automatic doors behind her seemed to pause before sliding shut. Ethan's face did not change much, but his eyes softened in a way Lily recognized. Victoria turned slightly, so everyone could hear her clearly. Mr. Walker warned us. He fixed a system we should have maintained better. He treated my family with courage, patience, and grace. And when the man who mocked him needed help, he helped him too. Grant lifted his head, then lowered it again. There are moments when public humiliation becomes justice, and moments when mercy makes that justice deeper. Ethan had given him mercy. That made the silence around Grant heavier than anger ever could. Victoria removed a small diamond ring from her left hand. She did not throw it. She did not perform. She simply held it out to Grant. This partnership is over, she said. The business one and the personal one. Grant stared at the ring as if it belonged to someone else's life. Victoria, do not do this here. No, she said quietly. I should have done many things here yesterday. I should have spoken when a child was embarrassed. I should have listened when a good man warned me. I should have known the difference between polish and worth. She placed the ring in his palm and stepped back. The finality of it was soft, but complete. Then Victoria turned to Ethan again. I cannot repay what you did. Ethan shook his head. I did not do it for repayment. I know, she said. That is why it matters. She took a breath and looked toward the lobby where Margaret and Noah were safe. But I can honor it. Meridian Ridge will fund a permanent mountain rescue program for this region. Equipment, training, Radio upgrades, road monitors, all of it. Not under my name. Her eyes moved to the silver cross hanging inside the truck. Under Grace Walker's. Lily's lips parted. Ethan looked down at the hood, and for the first time all morning, the strength in his face trembled just enough to remind everyone that quiet men are not made of stone. They are made of promises they kept when no one was watching. Grace would have liked that, he said. Victoria nodded, tears bright but held with dignity. I hope so. Lily stepped forward then, small and brave beneath the oversized quilt. She looked at Victoria for a long second, then held out the flashlight. Mom's light helped, she said. Victoria crouched to Lily's height, not caring that the wet pavement touched the hem of her coat. Your mom must have been very special. Lily nodded. She was. Daddy says special things do not have to look new. Victoria glanced at the truck, then back at the girl. Your daddy is right. Around them, the resort remained silent, but it was not the silence of embarrassment anymore. It was the silence that comes when people understand they have been invited to become better. Ethan opened the Ford's passenger door for Lily, just as he had the day before, only now no one laughed. Before climbing in, Lily wiped a small patch of mud from the old blue hood with the sleeve of her quilt. See, she whispered to the truck. I told them. Ethan heard her and smiled. Victoria heard her too, and lowered her head with something close to reverence. The Ford started with its rough, familiar growl, the sound no longer embarrassing to anyone who had been saved by it. As Ethan eased away from the entrance, staff members stepped back, not to hide the truck, but to make room for it. The tires rolled through shallow morning puddles, leaving muddy tracks across the polished valet lane. No one rushed to clean them. For a little while, those tracks stayed exactly where they were, a reminder that dignity does not always arrive spotless. Grace does not always speak loudly, and sometimes the thing people laugh at is the very thing strong enough to carry them home.